Tonight I'm going to offer some thoughts on Yom Kippur. I remember someone telling me that his father, who was in his 90s, Yom Kippur was his favorite day of the year. So I thought about that, I was aware that Yom Kippur is important and central and meaningful, but favorite? But I was young and naive then. I can't say that I've graduated to that level, to that madrega. It's my favorite day of the year, but there's a great deal about it that one looks forward to. I'd like to start by emphasizing an aspect of Yom Kippur which I think is under-publicized. Rabbi Yonah in the Shari Tshuva says that there's a mitzvah to eat on the day before Yom Kippur, a biblical mitzvah, and we have a festive meal, and he gives 3 reasons for that festive meal. One is that you should have enough strength to be able to function on Yom Kippur without eating and drinking. The second is to celebrate the fact that you have arrived at a time when your mistakes of the past will be forgiven and you can achieve a clean slate. That's the second reason. And the third reason is that Yom Kippur is a day of simcha, of joy. And there's no simcha without feasting. If you think the Chassidim invented that, you're right. Rabbi Yonah was the Chassid, and he invented it. It goes older than that as well. There's no simcha without a feast. The only trouble is that, as you all know, you're not allowed to eat and drink on Yom Kippur, so the feasting for the simcha of Yom Kippur is on Erev Yom Kippur, the day before Yom Kippur. But this stresses the idea that Yom Kippur is a day of joy. It's a mitzvah of simcha. And this is reflected in the halakha, because someone who loses a family member 3 days before Yom Kippur, and he's in the period of Shiva, first 7 days of mourning, Yom Kippur cancels Shiva. And what cancels Shiva is Simcha. It's a mitzvah of joy. So we have to appreciate that Yom Kippur is a day that brings joy. And we'll have to explain the ways in which it brings joy. Now, I want to get to that in about a half hour, perhaps, Yud Hashem. Anyway, I want to go through some of the details that we have to have in mind. And then perhaps we can build the answer to that question from the details. Yom Kippur is the day of doing tshuva. And tshuva enables us to remove from ourselves responsibility for past failures. Now, there are 3 words that are used typically for failures, and there are 3 elements that we ask God for in prayers as a response to our tshuva. And I would like to go through the 2 trios and explain them to you. The 3 words that I use for failure are chet, avon, and pesha. Chet is a word that can mean just failure altogether and encompasses all types of failures. It can be a general term. But specifically, it refers to things done unintentionally, but negligently. The person wasn't intending to do something forbidden. He didn't know it was forbidden, but he should have known. He should have conducted an investigation, and he could have known. So he's negligent, and that leads him to do something unintentionally. That is, of course, when you hear it, right, you know right away, it's the lightest type of failure. There's no rebellion, no lack of recognition of Kodesh Baruch Hu's authority. Simply, the person wasn't careful enough. Then there's avon. Avon means a deliberate transgression. He knows it's wrong, and he knows that he can choose either way, and he chooses to do the wrong thing. That, of course, is much worse than a chet. Worse even than that is pesha. Pesha has in it a rebelliousness. And this rebelliousness can be expressed in two different ways. One, I would say the milder way, what's called, according to some, amum lahachis in our terminology, is this. Imagine two pieces of meat, which are identical in every respect but one. Size, weight, expense, seasoning, cooking, they're identical. The only difference is that one is permissible and the other is forbidden. One's mutter and the other one's asur. But that's the only difference. And here comes Philip, and he said, listen, here they are. They cost the same amount. What do you have? Which one do you want? And he says, tell you what, I'm going to flip a coin. We'll see how it comes out. Heads to the left, right to tails to the right. In other words, the fact that one is permissible and the other is forbidden means nothing to him. Zero. Doesn't count at all. Because in every other respect, they're equal. He's not going to lose anything by taking the mutter one instead of the asur one. It doesn't matter to him. This is already described by some as the hachis, which means he's acting in a way designed to anger God. If I treat someone as utterly irrelevant to any serious discussion, I'm treating him with ultimate disrespect. I'm treating him in a degraded way. Worse than that is a person who says, you want it, so I won't do it. You forbid it, so I will do it. I'm out to get you. This one doesn't flip a coin when he sees the forbidden one or the permissible one. He takes the forbidden one. There's even a verse which describes such a person. Ma'im gduvim yumtaku, stolen waters are sweet because they're stolen this sweet. The same glass of water, if he gets permission to have it, it doesn't interest him. It's because it's stolen that he wants it. That sounds to you extreme and extravagant and unfamiliar and exaggerated. If you are an American watching this, you should think again. You know very well this attitude. The attitude that you're not an adult until you have violated every source of authority. You have to have stolen something from a store and run a red light and lied to your parents and stolen, cheated on a test. Otherwise, you're just a robot and you're a pushover and you're not your own man or woman. You have to violate every source of authority. Tosfos knew this 900 years ago. Like I said, when people are told they have to do something, a spirit of rebellion, don't tell me what to do. Don't push me around. Don't dictate my life. That's pesha. So now, there are these three types of transgressions, and we are looking for forgiveness for all of them. We're looking for absolution for all of them. And we mention them because each of us has on his roster transgressions of all three types. Maybe pesha sounds extreme. I think if you do a little depth psychology, introspect, you'll find that there is the spirit of rebellion that motivates all of us to at least some extent. Now, there are also three things that we ask for. And the usual order, it's not always in the same order, but the usual order is mechila, slicha, and kapara. In strict translation, mechila means release for an obligation. Slicha means forgiveness, and kapara means cleansing. Let me explain each one. If you are caught speeding in Israel, the policeman will give you a doch. Doch is an acronym. Daled Vav stands for din, va is and the ches stands for cheshbon. Din v'cheshbon. Now, literally, din means judgment, and cheshbon means calculation. And in the context of transgressions, says the Gaon of Vilna, explain it this way. When a person does a transgression, first of all, there's a law. And he violated the law. That law comes from the creator of the universe. It's binding. So he's done something illegal. For that, you get a din. Din is something which has rules and is objective, and you can arrive at a decision in a reasonably objective way, in a reasonably agreed way. When deciding whether a person has committed a crime, if you have a well-defined and articulated set of laws, you can usually discover what law was broken, if any. But when a person violates a commandment of God, really two things happen. Number one, he violated the law, but number two, while he was violating the law, in that period of time, with those resources that he used, he should have been doing something else. He should have been doing something positive. In terms of service of God, there's no time off. No time off. You're always supposed to be serving with God. If you're sleeping, your sleep should be serving God also. That's a whole long story. I'm not going to do it tonight. So the second question will be, well, he spent this time and this effort, the telephone system, his intelligence, whatever it is, performing the transgression. What could he, what should he have been doing with that time and those resources to do something positive? That requires a calculation. That's what's called cheshbon. They ask what was available to him and how well could he have done and what kind of thing could he have accomplished. And he's responsible for both. Now, in both cases, since God gives us everything that we have, if we misuse it, strictly speaking, we could be fined for that misuse of the resources that we have. Because Baruch could say, you used the mind that I gave you, the body that I gave you, the telephone system that I made available, and so on and so on. And you should have been, in the operating room, sterilizing the instruments. All that means that you owe. Sure, I owe. Trouble is, what will I pay back with? Nothing's mine. Nothing's really mine. There's no such thing as recognized real property. There are only things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu assigns by virtue of various events that take place to my use, like when you're hired to do a job and they give you a computer. They don't mean you should take it home and play 3D games on it. I mean, that's your work tool. So the things that are assigned to me as a work tool, but there are strict limits as to what I'm authorized to do with the work tool. So, having performed the transgression and failed to perform the mitzvah that should have been done in the same means and time, the person owes God, but he can't pay. That's why he asks for mechila. Mechila is a word that cancels out monetary debts. Somebody owes you money, you want to release him from it. In Hebrew, you're moichel. So that's the first thing we ask for. Second is forgiveness. If you do something to violate someone's will, go against his wishes, it would be normal for him to feel angry, feel upset, to feel alienated, distanced. What one wants to do is recover one's relationship with God, one's connection with God. One ingredient that's necessary is that God should forgive what we've done. So, that's slicha, as it's translated, is forgiveness. The problem is, once you have both of those, what's left over? Because Baruch Hu says, I'm not going to charge you, I'm not going to require you to repay what you misused, and I forgive you. Why is there a third element? Kapara means cleansing. Cleansing from what? What's left behind? I heard an explanation. I believe this is what Rabbi Soloveitchik meant when he said it. I say I believe because I had it wrong for a number of years, and then I came to doubt it because of my own thinking. I asked somebody else, he said, yeah, that's wrong. So I can't remember it clearly from the way he said it. I have testimony that this is what he meant. I'll give you an example, a parable. George is driving, his brakes are loose. He knows that it's convenient for him to get them fixed next week, right? So he goes driving in a residential area, and a child runs into the street. He jams on the brakes, and they slip, and he kills the child. Negligent manslaughter. Okay, in this jurisdiction, negligent manslaughter carries a fine of up to $500,000. George is just barely getting by. There's no way that he's going to pay $500,000. And the parents of the child realize this, and they say to George, okay, we're not going to chase you in and out of court and everything else. We're not looking for the money. And then some years go by, and they say to George, you know, you were careless, you were negligent, you were irresponsible. It happens. People do that. We've also done things that are irresponsible. You happen to be in a situation where your irresponsibility had a tragic consequence. We forgive you. We understand you. We forgive you. Suppose both of those things happen. Now, there's a public event, and George is there, and the parents are there. Would you expect George to go up to the parents and say, oh, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Haven't seen you in several months. How are you? Tell me, what's new? Let's catch up on old times. I don't think that George is likely to do that, because although they've forgiven him, he knows what he did to them. He cost them their child. Now, I don't want to say that he can't forgive himself. That's a mistake. Because forgiving yourself is a fantasy. Any description, any scenario which cuts God out isn't true, isn't real. It's just fantasy. So to talk about forgiving yourself as if you have your own values, and your values are for you the values that matter, and they matter because they're your values, and then you have to live up to your values, you have to forgive yourself, that is a fundamentally wrong picture from a Jewish point of view. But just as George will find it difficult to reintroduce himself into a comfortable, friendly, accepting relationship with the child's parents, so that you may also feel uncomfortable in projecting himself into such a relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. You are the creator of the universe. And I violated your will, and sometimes I did it on purpose. I did it knowingly. I feel myself as if I'm just not worthy. If you forgive me, that means you, out of your infinite generosity, are willing to overlook it or forgive me. But I can't presume on that. The idea of kapara is one of many such ideas, but one idea of kapara is to be cleansed of the psychological debility in me which prevents me from having the kind of relationship with God that I had before. I'm held back because of my own sensitivity to what I did, that I can't present myself before God. The loss here is not because I can't look myself in the mirror. It doesn't belong to our way of thinking at all, as far as I can tell. But I can't present myself before God. So I ask God for kapara, that He should enable me to have that confidence to stand before Him. This is why, as those of us who have been studying the Rambam says twice in the laws of tshuva that the idea of doing tshuva is that I'm not the same person who did that crime. If you really internalize that, then you won't have any hesitation in going back to a relationship with God with all the familiarity, with all the intimacy, with all the connection that you had before, because the past doesn't weigh you down anymore. The past is gone. So that's kapara. So these are the three things that we ask for on Yom Kippur. Now, of course, we ask for them as a result of our tshuva. To ask God for mechila and slicha when you haven't done tshuva, you can ask, and it's possible that God will give even without tshuva. That's possible. So I wouldn't say that one shouldn't ask, but that means asking for a free gift for which there's no guarantee. If someone does tshuva, then he's guaranteed. Ein davar omen b'fnei tshuva. Nothing stands in the way of tshuva. So a person has to have the confidence that if he does tshuva, then between him and God, it's over. Now, there may be other things that need to happen for him to be able to leave the world clean, but instead of thinking of a king whose will has been violated and thereby he applies a punishment. That's the wrong way to think about it. Rambam is absolutely clear about this in Hilchos Tshuva. He says a person does tshuva. Tshuva is like a barrier against punishment. A person who does tshuva, there is no punishment. One of the categories of atonement is a sin which carries a serious penalty like kores, and there, in order for the atonement to be complete, he has to do tshuva, he has to go through Yom Kippur, and there's suffering. But that suffering is not punishment. That suffering is cleansing. There's something left behind in him that needs to be cleansed so that he can stand before God. Use my description or other descriptions. So as far as the relationship with God is concerned, the relationship is turned around. And that's why the Rambam says that when a person does tshuva, his connection with God is utterly transformed. Last night, Emish, not yesterday, but last night, he says he was distanced, and God hated him, and God abandoned him. And when he did mitzvos, they were not accepted. And when he prayed, God says, "I don't hear you, and I'm not answering you." And now, having done tshuva, he's beloved. If you pay careful attention, he doesn't say, "Oh, that's only for one category." But if the other categories requires longer time, no. If he does tshuva, he's beloved now. Even without Yom Kippur, he's beloved now. It's just that other things have to happen to complete the cleansing process. That's why he can consistently say that even though suffering may be required for a serious transgression, but there's no punishment. There's no punishment at all once a person does tshuva. The suffering is just cleansing. It's like surgery. The surgeon wants to benefit you, and you hire him, and you thank him when he does the surgery, even though it's painful. But it's for your good. Whereas punishment is to eradicate something, to respond to something that's evil in a way that bespeaks its evil. The suffering that cleanses is not that at all. There's no evil there anymore. So, the hope is to do tshuva, and in fact, there's a mitzvah of tshuva in Yom Kippur. We explained that at length in the Hilchos Tshuva of the Rambam. Others see it differently. But everyone agrees that there's a mitzvah of tshuva on Yom Kippur. And of course, the day is spent in confession and meditating on the honesty of evaluating our actions without rationalizations, without excuses, without escape clauses, and resolving to change our behavior in the future. And expressing our regret for having done what we did. Now, this may be obvious, but I think at least it should be said. Regret means, I wish I hadn't done it. But we have to be very careful here. A person can say, I wish I hadn't done it, for lots of different reasons. There's a wonderful word which describes this feeling, wonderful modern word. It's called cringeworthy. You think I did that? Oh, God, why did I do that? Why did I do that? It was such a stupid thing to do. And when I think about it, I'm so embarrassed. I did that? Where was I? What wasn't I thinking? That may have nothing to do with good and evil. That may have nothing to do with right and wrong. It was just colossally stupid. And you know that people thought it was stupid, and they will continue to think that it was stupid. And you feel, I wish I hadn't done it. That's not what tshuva is talking about. What tshuva is talking about is where you're metcharet, you regret what you did because it was wrong. Much worse than being stupid is being wrong, doing something wrong. So that's the sense that one has to have. I really stepped out of line. Did something that was condemnable, could be condemned. Now, when we say that nothing stands in front of tshuva, the Gemara used the example of Menashe, who was a king who instituted idol worship in the temple and hired priests of idol worship to carry out the rites. and he induced people to among the nation to worship idols and all the rest, in addition to other crimes. But they did tshuva. And when he died, the angels said, okay, we know that God treats tshuva as important and powerful and everything else, but not for this guy. Not for that's going too far. He went beyond the pale. It's too much. And so the Medrash says, I think it's Yerushalmi, says that they set up roadblocks on all the highways to heaven. Angelic roadblocks. Not coming up this way. So what are they going to do? He dug a tunnel under the throne of glory and brought him up through the tunnel. Now, you have to pay attention when Chazal say things, right? It doesn't say that Chazal, that God broke the roadblocks. Oh, how stupid can you be? I want it. You don't want it? Get out of the way. No. Meaning that when an angel put a roadblock on the highway, he was right. Menashe is not coming up on this highway. He was right. It's just that there are other ways to get up. And one way is that God digs a tunnel that he can get you up. Which means that the angel suffers from tunnel vision. He sees one thing, he sees it correctly, he draws the right conclusion about that one thing, but it doesn't give him a global perspective. God says, tshuva always works. Always. That's my highest commitment. So if he did tshuva, then he's coming up to the throne of glory. Now, I think there's a logical problem here, because I think in terms of our own reasoning and our own moral principles, this is very hard to understand. Let me take an extreme example, and then let me show you how the principle, an extreme example, really spreads to cover almost everything, if not everything. Let's say murder. Okay, so he committed murder, and now he's sorry. He's sorry. Isn't that nice? He's sorry. Gee, I shouldn't have done it. Oh, man. I won't do it again. I sold my gun. I'm out of that. I'm not doing that anymore. But the person's dead. He's dead. His being sorry is not going to bring him back. How can that repair it? How can that repair it? How's that possible? The transgressions are in the past. The consequences are in the past. They're over and done with. Finished. What do you mean that he can somehow become a new person as if I didn't do it? I think what we have here is a real mystery. And I think our sources describe it as a mystery. And the question is, how do we live with it as a mystery? I heard now, just last week, from the current Boston Rabbi Yerushalayim, there's a Gemara in Pesachim which says 7 things were created before the creation of the world. Okay, now, if you have your logic cap on, how can a thing be created before the creation of the world? Isn't this thing part of the world? Got it. We hear it. It means that it's more fundamental than everything else. Everything else depends upon it. It transcends the level of reality of the other things in the world. Okay? But he said like this, the world, the rest of the world is created, and one of the things in it that's created is time. And time marches forward. Time doesn't go backward. If tshuva were created in the world, that would be created in time, then it would be subject to time. Then it would never be able to take care of the past. One of the things that Chazal are telling us when they say it was created before the creation of the world is that it isn't subject to time. And since it isn't subject to time, there's the power of changing the past. Now, that's a kind of proof, but proving something is one thing and explaining it is something else. In science, you have this all the time. You prove that it happens, but have no idea why it happens. That's a separate investigation. And there's no explanation here as to why it happens. Now, I need either a blue book, a chumash, or a siddur or something. I want to read some verses that... okay, thank you. There's a passage from Isaiah that we read on fast days. I think that the words there describe this situation in part. I say that because we never get to the bottom of anything. We just have to, but this is an aspect. Okay. Oh, he put it in the back. Okay. One second. Oh, where is it? It should be before the Yom Tov. His place. Oh, Tisha B'Av. Okay. So then there's a haftorah that said in the afternoon of every Tanis.
Would you rather have the English? In case you prefer.
And it says Tanis Tzibur, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Purim, and public fasts. So, Hanukkah. This is Tish Purim. Oh, maybe this is it. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So the passage from Isaiah, and it says like this: Seek out Hashem when he's found, call to him when he's close. We spoke about that. Let the wicked person forsake his way, each person the crookedness of his thoughts, and he should return to Hashem, and God will have mercy on him, to our God, who is great or plentiful in forgiveness. Okay, do tshuva, come back to God, and he will forgive. 4, key. My thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways, says Hashem. As high as the heavens are over the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. What? Listen, do tshuva, Hashem will forgive. Because my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways. My thoughts and ways are as high as the heavens over the earth, over your thoughts and ways. What's the connection? What's the because? I think part of the message is, Isaiah is saying, I know you don't understand this. It's hard for you to believe this. That your tshuva from now on means that what you did in the past is wiped out. I know that that's not something that you understand. How do I know? Because I created you, and I created your mind. I know its limitations. But I'm telling you, that's not how I run my world. I run my world that tshuva wipes out the past. That's the way I run my world. So I'm telling you it's true, even though you don't understand it. And it goes on. Another key. 4, just like rain and snow come from the heavens and will not return to the heavens until or unless they have fructified the earth and caused it to sprout and blossom, plant life, and gives seed to the one who wants to plant seed and bread to the ones to eat, so is my word that comes out of my mouth will not come back to me empty unless it has done what I want and caused to be successful what I have sent it to do. So God says, I made my world. I made my world to be a success. Tshuva is one of the elements in my world. I made it to do this. So it's going to happen. And if you don't understand it, just submit. Submit and accept it. Now, it depends upon how identified you are with your intellect. If you really don't accept things that you can't understand, which you ought to understand is not a good position, not a terribly smart position, then you'll be just irritated and disturbed by this. But if you recognize your limitations, and you know that there are things that even other people understand that you don't understand, and you train yourself to recognize earned authority, not the authority of guns, but the earned authority of scholarship and of brilliance and knowledge, understanding, so then you can accept it. And then the next verse says, Ki v'simcha seitzeyu, for in joy you shall go out. V'shalom tuvalon, you shall spend your time in peace. The mountains and the hills will burst forth in song before you, joyous song. All the trees of the forest will clap their hands, and so forth and so on. In other words, realizing this will give you tremendous joy. And one reason it will give you tremendous joy is because it means that no matter how far you go, no matter how far you sink, no matter how disastrous a record you create, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't give up on you. If you're breathing, like the Gemara says, Kol neshama ta'al ko, every soul shall praise God. I'll call neshima v'neshima, on every breath you have to thank Him. But it's not just, He gave me breath, He gave me life, so I have to say thank you. No, He's investing in you. He believes in you. He hasn't given up on you. It's like a real parent who, no matter what you do, if the person is a parent and loves you as a child, never gives up on you and never abandons you. That creates a sense not only of security, but also a sense of being loved, being cherished. That's precious. That can give a person a joy even in the darkest of circumstances. And I think that's one of the things that we feel on Yom Kippur. In the Passover Haggadah, there's a passage which recites all the things that God did for us in taking us out of Egypt and sustaining us in the wilderness and bringing us into the land of Israel. 15 different levels. A famous Dayenu song. And when you summarize the 15 levels after the Dayenu song is over, it adds a few words at the end. He built for us the chosen house, to cleanse us of all our sins. For years, when I got to that point in the Passover Haggadah, my heart would sink, to my boots. Who's talking about sins? Who's talking about transgressions, failures, crimes? We're talking about God saving us from Egypt, talking about God's love for us, everything else. And how I have to bring in sin. It's just, to me, it was jarring. Until I asked my Rabbi, that's all. And he said to me, I didn't understand it right away, I had to think about it for a while, but what he said to me was this. There are 15 things that he did. He split the sea and destroyed our pursuers and gave us the manna to eat and led us through all the plagues that he did all of that for us. And he brought us into the land, he gave us the Torah, and he brought us into the land of Israel. Now suppose we fail him then. Wouldn't it be reasonable for God to say, I've had it already. It's enough. I did all this for you and you still fail me? Forget it. It's over. I can't have you anymore. No. After all those things, what God's worried about, Kivyochel, is maybe they're going to fail again. Well, what happened? There has to be a way to cleanse them of those failures. I'm going to give them a temple to cleanse them of the failures. What an exquisite expression of love, of caring, of support, of investment, rather than saying, there's a red line beyond which I'm not going to take care of it anymore. Now, I must say, there is some discussion whether this applies even if someone doesn't do tshuva. There is a discussion about that. But let's say a person does tshuva, still, after all of that, did such a thing. Why should tshuva work? Why should the Kodesh Baruch Hu's commitment to tshuva be absolute, so that it conquers all failure? That sense that there's it's like a person on a high rope. If there's a net below him, he knows he's not going to die. If he falls off the rope, he's not going to die. That's why in real acts there's no net, so it's really dangerous. And then give him more applause. But we have a safety net. It's not going to happen that way. So I think that's part of the simcha that you have on Yom Kippur. And then, that we have the three major festivals during the year, and each one has a designation that we have in the prayers about the festivals. Pesach is Zman Cherusenu, which means the time of our freedom, one of the words for freedom. And the Shavuos is called Zman Matan Torasenu, the time in which the Torah is given to us. Sukkot is called Zman Simchosenu, the time of our joy. Now the truth is, there's a mitzvah of joy on all the holidays. So why would you pick out Sukkot to be given the title of Zman Simchosenu? They're all Zman Simchosenu. And as my Chavrusa, Rabbi Moshe Bekel pointed out to me, it's very interesting. It is a mitzvah of Simcha on every one of the major holidays, but in the verses it's not equal, because on Pesach it doesn't say it at all, and Shavuos it says it once, and Sukkot it says it several times. Now, of course, we compare the holidays one to another, and we transfer the dinner from one to another, so we know there's a mitzvah on all three. But the Mikra, the written Torah, stresses that Sukkot is a time of joy in a way that doesn't stress for the other two. And the simplest explanation is that you leave Yom Kippur clean. You leave Yom Kippur with a clean slate, and you have the sense of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's love for you, that He's willing to wipe the slate clean in a way which our moral intuitions or judgments wouldn't understand, wouldn't accept. That creates a tremendous sense of joy, and that, since Sukkot is only 4 days later, so that's why it is a time of special simcha, special joy. It's the joy of Yom Kippur carried over. And in fact, one of the famous explanations of the Lulav and Esrog is like a person who is in a contest against an enemy, and he wins the contest, and he's given an emblem of victory. You've been in a contest, in this case a contest with your old self, and a contest with your evil inclination, and you have the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. And if you did tshuva on Yom Kippur, then you've had a tremendous victory, and the Lulav and Esrog is a symbol of the fact that you were victorious. So Sukkot is Zman Simchosenu, time of joy, because we're carrying through the joy of Yom Kippur. That you don't have in the other two holidays, because they're very distant from Yom Kippur, and who knows what happened between last Yom Kippur and Pesach or Shavuos. So this is one of the reasons why a person could look forward to Yom Kippur. And I'll give one more reason. I'm going to have to end a little bit early because I have to get on a session to Johannesburg. We spoke about the 10 days, being the 10 days when God is closest to man. We spoke about the shofar announcing His presence, shofar at the end of Yom Kippur announcing His presence, leaving of His presence. And it's true. All 10 days are like that. But on Yom Kippur, where He cleanses us, it's not just closeness, but it's caring and taking care of and giving us a new start. There's a feeling of Avinu They're very, very powerfully on Yom Kippur. If we think of our Father who loves us and wants us to be, to have the relationship with Him. I have another charus where I learned Rosh Shapiro's writings, and it says there, Chibi Yasera Noda Lanu She Barosana B'Tzelem. Chibi Yasera, he reads it like this: Chibi Yasera, great, excessive love was made known to us. Not excessive love that it was made known to us that we were created in B'Tzelem. No, the excessive love was made known to us, comma, that we were created in B'Tzelem. So it means that because Baruch Hu wants us to know how much He loves us. He wants us to know that. Why does He want us to know that? Because when you feel that someone loves you, then you feel love in return. Then you feel confident in seeking out that love. He says this, go looking at seeking that love. That's why Kodesh Baruch Hu makes it known to us. I think Yom Kippur is a very dramatic example of Kodesh Baruch Hu's love for us that he made known to us. This fits the fact, as you know, that the second tablets were received by the Jewish people on Yom Kippur. Moses came down from Mount Sinai in Yom Kippur and presented the tablets to the Jewish people. The first tablets were broken because of the golden calf. The golden calf was a gigantic crime, to the extent that God said to Moses, I'm going to wipe them all out. Moses pleaded on our behalf, and thereby prevented the enactment of that terrible decree. But we were forgiven. We were actually forgiven. So that sense of forgiveness is exactly what builds it into Yom Kippur. That Yom Kippur is a day of forgiveness. Because that first Yom Kippur of the Jewish people was a day in which the forgiveness was acted out. And that's the same is true, as I said, with Sukkot. Gaon Vilna says the reason why Sukkot is in the fall, to answer the tourist question, which I'm not going to go through in detail now, is because when they committed the sin of the golden calf, they lost the clouds of glory. And they returned on the 15th of Tishrei, and that's when the holiday is celebrating the clouds of glory, which is Sukkot, is dated in Tishrei and not in the fall. Because we're celebrating the second clouds that God gave to us after He forgave us. So this commitment that Kodesh Baruch Hu has to forgive us as an expression of His love for us is something which should give us a tremendous amount of joy on Yom Kippur. Together with the difficulty of fasting, for those for whom it's difficult, and the inner psychological work that has to be done to face the failures and to resolve to overcome them, but one shouldn't lose sight of the sense of joy. That's something which will help prepare for Yom Kippur.